So, hello everybody again. I think it's the second hello. Firstly, listening to Johan, he did it again, didn't he? I mean, every time I'm listening to Johan, it's a mind-blowing eye-opener. And please, ladies and gentlemen, just give another round of applause for this amazing communicator of important science. And being a science journalist for 30 years, I know this gift is not given to all the scientists on the planet. So this is very special. Thank you again, Johan. The topic of this panel is Mission Net Zero 1.5, counting the true costs of action and inaction. We want to compare what are the costs if we act or if we don't. But before we even start, one thing has become really crystal clear to me while listening to Johan. It seems as if the state we are in is much more critical than most of us want to believe. That's a very important thought we have to consider when talking about it, which means even the targets we are currently failing to meet are not strong enough. And that is a double failure, if you want to put it this way. So if we want to talk about the costs of inaction, maybe some of these costs will stay for us for decades. You said at least 30 years in an ideal world. So we have to face that fact. Now with me sitting on stage, Johan Rockström, you've listened to him, and Nico Rosberg, of course. Nico, welcome. Please give a warm applause for Nico. And of course, the wonderful Kate Brandt, CSO of Google. Kate, let's start with you, because just you're sitting next to me. What was going through your mind when you were listening to Johan? Because every time we are listening to Johan, it's something like, oh, this, yes, I've got this. It's every time it's like this wake-up moment, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more, and thank you again, Johan, and also congratulations on your award last night. It was so well deserved.
He was awarded last night, just to mention it again, and maybe if we keep on going, we managed to flush him. So.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. I think the research is so clear, and you communicate it so clearly, and it creates a great sense of urgency, and it's scary. I mean, I want to acknowledge every time I see this, even though I'm living and breathing the climate science every day, it's really scary. You know, Nico, I know you have little kids. I have a 2.5-year-old. This is the future that our children are inheriting, so it's really personal. But the other thing I really appreciate, Johan, that you bring forward is that we still have time to act, and that is exactly why this is the decisive decade. So although it's scary, I also think that we need to move forward boldly. We need to keep going further and faster together. So that's really what I see when I look at the research. And also, you know, Dirk and Nico, we were together yesterday at Google's office here in Berlin. We were hosting our first ever Google Climate Summit in Germany, and we also released a piece of research that showed that here in Germany, there's an aggressive, 2045 goal for net zero. Technology will get us about 20 to 25% of the way there. That's very hopeful. And when you're here today walking around the floor at GreenTech, you see that. You see the critical importance of innovation and technology. And that's how we're thinking about this at Google. We want to drive forward, making information available and moving innovation forward so that we can address the climate crisis together.
Johan, of course, it's your task to pass your important message to all the people, but the target group here is very clear. We are talking to business people, we are talking to change makers. So are there some kind of low-hanging fruits these kind of business people can now harvest to help us on the path to dam the climate catastrophe?
Well, I think if you're talking about low-hanging fruit, I think the one key opportunity is to use events like this to really establish partnerships, pre-competitive partnerships between innovating companies, because we have a lot of research showing that large enough minorities can tip the logic in the whole market, in the whole majority, and that these minorities must reach in the order of 15 to 20% of penetration of markets to be able to tip over the logic at the very large scale. And we start seeing those numbers coming up at those double-digit levels on renewable energy, on electric mobility, on all forms of material efficiency, on textile sustainability. But individual companies have difficulties in adding that up. So I think one low-hanging fruit is really to have alliances of action. And number two is, to be honest, I think the statistic that really keeps me, at least reasonably harmonious many times is that time and time again, it's proven that 70% of citizens around the world trust science, they're concerned about climate change, and they want climate action. So there's a silent majority out there ready to move. And I think it's a question for science, but also for business to offer these new attractors. Because that's what you and I have been talking a lot about, Nico, that what we're seeing is a change in narrative where sustainability and climate action is not a sacrifice, it's the pathway to a more attractive, modern future. And I think that's also something that we have not been good enough, certainly not in science, but perhaps also not among all of us, so to say, to really communicate. And then finally, one thing that I really am frustrated about is that we seem to be unable to really take the argument that the unconventional businesses, the unconventional way of delivering consumer goods and energy and in all forms of inputs to the economy is subsidized by the planet in such a massive way that it's unfair competition. Strictly speaking, if a green tech company succeeds on the market, it's doing that in an unfair competition because we're not factoring in the real costs of the unsustainable practices. I think that has to be called out much more. I think we should not be afraid of subsidizing e-mobility efforts and really putting pressure on policy to correct this market failure. I mean, we do it to a very limited extent on carbon, but have you ever heard of a price on nitrogen or any price on misuse of fresh water? Oh, no. So I think there's a need for us to also ramp up and become even more courageous or stronger in our, let's say, demands on society.
One more question. I know it's a thought I barely dare to say because it's so simple, but you run a business to make profit. Can science be helpful for green tech business to make profit? Because that is what it's all about.
Well, of course, science, and that is something that we should mutually always agree upon, both businesses and science gains from having a firewall in between us. That there should be an integrity where the science is never, ever being accused of being influenced by the private companies. But that said, I think we're really good today at having that integrity while still having a very good interaction in between us. And I would say the following, which is actually quite frustrating to say, but you should use it. The talk I gave now, I would call that a kind of insider information. It's, bring it in and act.
Would be illegal on the stock market, but it's okay if we talk about climate.
Exactly. It's kind of uncomfortable because it's, of course, public domain. Everyone should know it. But if you take the science seriously, you'll be one step ahead of the game.
Yes.
And we know where we're moving. The writing is on the wall. It's not a question if we will decarbonize the world economy. The only challenge remaining is will we do it fast enough? That's the challenge. But the fact that we're moving in that direction is unstoppable. So if you want to be one step ahead, listen to science.
Listen to Johan.
Well, not necessarily me, but the science community.
And Nico, of course, there's no doubt you're very aware of the problems, but when you listen to Johan, does it still awake the wish inside you that you still have to accelerate with your efforts to save the climate?
No, of course. I mean, it's always a reminder, a refresher to all of us to witness these new findings, and we really appreciate that you even showed us today non-public findings that you're only going to launch in a couple of weeks. So that was an honor. But my big hope as well rests with the new generation, the younger generation. Yeah. Just 2 days ago, I was at the beach in the south of France, and I was swimming with my kids. And I come out of the water, I go to see my wife, and my elder daughter, she's 7, and she says, "Oh, Dad, I have to go back in the water." I'm like, "Why?" So I see her run in the water. She saw some plastic there. So she jumps in the water, she takes out the plastic, brings it all the way to our family little table where we were there so that it can be thrown away. And that was such a powerful moment for me that to see my daughter at the age of 7 care so much already. Because for her, the turtles eat the plastic, they get stomachache, they even die sometimes. I need to save the turtles. So that was really a lovely moment, and it gives me a lot of hope as well from that new generation.
Wonderful. So it's a change in our mindset, But Johan, as well, we need a change in our business sets, don't we? Because you just mentioned it, we have to take advantage of what the science tells us. What would be the next move for looking forward business makers?
Yeah. I mean, since the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, the legally binding Paris Agreement, which, by the way, behind the scenes, business was very, very influential in the success there. So if it hadn't been for We Mean Business and Nigel Topping and all the work and the big companies like Google and others, I think we would have never gotten the political leadership to have the courage to really sign that agreement. At that moment, companies in the world embarked on the Science-Based Target Initiative, which I would argue is one of the most important efforts of really aligning with science and building into the business along scope 1, 2, and 3, following the carbon law of cutting emissions by half every decade. So the Science-Based Target Initiative today have over 2,000 companies in the world. Many of you are probably members. It's really successful. I see that in the next coming years, we need science-based targets also for the other planetary boundaries. There's more and more demand for this among companies. And the first one off the block is biodiversity. The second one is fresh water. And the third one is, for sure, nitrogen and phosphorus. So we can get the eutrophication, the fresh water, and the biodiversity as science-based targets that businesses start measuring against. Then I think we are in a really nice position to accelerate the pathway towards a safe climate landing. Because again, the tendency is you measure only carbon, and therefore you measure only fossil fuel-based emissions. Now we need to take the whole resource and the biosphere into the model. But of course, we cannot jump right into the full complexity of things. I fully recognize this. But we are actually now serving businesses better from science. The Earth Commission is bringing forward science-based target for land, water, nitrogen, phosphorus, and it's basically in the public domain in the coming weeks. So that, I think, is one next step. But the second one, which is I would challenge you, I'd love to see more and more of you in innovation companies to be able to really prove that sustainability and profitability go hand in hand. Just to communicate the evidence that we see no contradiction between really sustainable business and profitability. There are very few CEOs in the world that go out publicly with that message. And I think that's the most powerful message. That we scientists say it is just very
It's like
limited.
counseling.
Exactly. So I think that is one, if you can measure within your companies how you're gaining from your very ambitious investments in circular economy, in scope 1, 2, 3, measuring of carbon, in efforts of trying to avoid loss of biodiversity, and that you're earning more money out of it, put it on the table. That is very powerful.
I have a quick question, Kate.
Yeah.
You are representing one of the largest corporations in the world, yeah? Where have you seen that Google may have the ability to have its greatest impact to hit these targets that Johan is talking about?
Yes, absolutely. So we have been very focused on this in our strategy, and we look at it across a few dimensions. We're an information and an innovation company. We have products that reach billions of people every day, so we're very focused on supporting individuals who want to act on climate, but also businesses. We are very pleased to be a part of the Exponential Roadmap initiative, to be a part of this movement of businesses taking action, of setting bold goals. And what we talk about now in the climate and corporate spaces, it's all about ambition to action. So we also really want to support businesses in achieving their goals. And we can do that through both helping with planetary insights. Johan, this is very related to your work. We have tools like the Earth Engine, which is available to any business to use to get much better insights into their emissions footprint. Unilever is using this to help with their zero deforestation goal, but also to help whole sectors innovate. We're working with utilities like Engie to use the power of AI to help them bring much more clean energy online. We can now predict wind energy 36 hours in advance. That makes it much better to dispatch. It makes grids much more stable. These are the kinds of ways that we can support businesses in innovating. And then, of course, it starts with us. We're very committed to this in our own business. We've, through the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, set a goal to have our emissions before 2030 and get all the way to net zero through carbon removals. So we see a big opportunity here.
It sounds very like an educational challenge Google is facing here. So is it really, please take us with you, give us a Google Insight view, is it really an intrinsic thing you want to do, or is it just because society and the market is demanding it, that you are educating the world about scientific facts?
Yeah, I mean, I spent the first part of my career in the public sector, and as I considered coming to the private sector, that was a big decision for me. But the reason that I came to Google, and I've been here for 8 years, is it's in the DNA of the company. It's a deep commitment. And we're always looking for new ways that we can innovate and contribute. And right now we see such a big opportunity with individual action. We've been talking about the criticality of corporate action, of policy action, but individuals also have such an important role to play. I read some IEA research recently that said 55% of the way we're going to get to net zero by 2050 is through consumer choices. But people don't know how to act. And we see this in Google Trends. We love to look at what are people searching for. It gives you a sense of where are people. And we're seeing searches like rooftop solar, electric vehicles, even thrifting are at all-time highs. But people don't know how to turn that ambition into action. And so when you look at what can we do as individuals, home energy and transportation are 20% of what we have to solve for. And so we've been very focused there, giving people things that they can do in their daily lives. Like when you use Google Maps, you can take the most eco-friendly route. It's that little green leaf you see in Google Maps. People across Europe and the US have been using this for over a year. We've already saved 1.2 million metric tons of CO2. That's equivalent to taking 250,000 cars off the road. So those are the kinds of easy decisions we want to enable people to make that are actually going to add up to real impact.
Great. So Nico, you run festivals like this all around the world. And a festival like this as well has a very educational function for the society. Do you feel already a change in behavior and in the mindset of the people you meet every day in your working life?
Well, this is what we're about as the GreenTech Festival. It's about not creating fear, but really mentioning and showing the opportunity that there is at the moment to innovate and to accelerate this change. And that's why our motto also is to try and celebrate this change in a way. And you were saying how important it is to shift the consumer mindset,
right.
And so, for example, this is why the name festival also. When we went to Singapore, we had Singapore's leading music artist, who was the face of our event, who joined our event, who performed on stage, who did the keynote, and he has millions of followers. So this is also what we're trying to do here, to connect the science, the tech, the innovation with the consumers via really engaging means. And that's what really the GreenTech Festival is about, and I think has been working really, really well.
Johan, changing the mindset of the people over the next 2 days here on this very festival. We have representatives from most major German political parties. We have a lot of NGOs, of course, around. People from the United Nations, the European Climate Foundation. So the world of climate protection gathers here in Berlin in the next 2 days. What's your advice for these people?
Well, I think that two pieces of advice. I mean, number one is that 1.5 degrees Celsius is about to be lost, but it's a physical limit and we need to hold on to it never give that up. And the second one is, I would argue today that the most important is that if you want to have societies that are resilient, peaceful, prosperous, equitable, in a world that is manageable, you really want to speed up the efforts on sustainability. It's no longer about protecting the environment only. It's really the pathway towards the future modern world we all desire. There are no sustainable development goals in Agenda 2030 unless you go sustainable. There's no manageable future unless you really decarbonize the world economy. It's no longer a question of choice. It's a question of pathways to the future. And I think that mind shift needs to be settled. And the reason why that mind shift is so powerful today is that you sit with scalable solutions. So it's no longer a fantasy. You don't have to talk about a complete reboot and then nobody knows what to do with it. The reboot is there to accelerate scalable solutions that we know are there. Actually, we know how to cut emissions by half by 2030. We can do it. It's actually fully doable. Not only is it doable, it's even doable without subsidies in competitive vis-a-vis fossil fuel-based energy systems. It's just a question of breaking the inertia in the global economy. And that's why we need to have these science, policy, business, civil society engagements, much, much more frequently. I think these kind of festivals are fundamental for that transition.
And if you're talking about speed and acceleration, who could be a better representative for that than Nico? So thank you again for running this festival. Kate, what does business need from NGOs and governments? So what do you ask?
Yes. So, what we see from the most recent IPCC report, AR6, is we have the solutions, we have the technology, but we need to deploy it more quickly. And I think policy is absolutely critical to that. When we look here in Europe, such important ambition, the European Green Deal, the ambition to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. We, as a business, want to support this, and policymakers can help all of us in business do that. And I think there's three things I would say. The first is that we have this twin transition of digital and green. We need policies that enable us. We need innovation. We need incentives, and we need to move more quickly. And number two is especially making clean energy deployment faster and easier. And then third is also holding businesses accountable, making sure when businesses make claims about what they're doing, about their progress, that it's transparent. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and we're excited about what's happening here in Europe.
Very important thing. Nico, this is, Kate is representing the really big business, one of the largest companies on the planet, but I know you're investing a lot in startups. So innovation, small business. What do you think big business can learn from all these startups, from all these smart young people coming up into the business world with new ideas?
Well, I mean, what big business can learn is first of all, the speed of execution and the speed of innovation. That's really phenomenal what I'm seeing in the startup space. Very, very impressive. And there's also a tipping point now that, of course, green tech startups are really coming with some incredible business models that can be immensely profitable as well as having that impact. I mean, one of the biggest seed rounds last year was Tesseract Energy out of the UK, and they raised $75 million from a piece of paper with there were 4 guys, I think a team of 4. So that was very, very impressive, and that's lovely to see. The hockey stick dynamic that's also happening in that space.
We are in Berlin, and many people have had some experience with the more extreme part of the climate movement. We have organizations like Last Generation or Extinction Rebellion, name it. What do you guys, one after the other, think about the more extreme response to the inaction we are facing in the politics so far? What do you think, Johan? Is it a good thing? Is it helpful, or is it more that we shock people away from the good idea?
This is a big question. I'll try to be short. Number one is I think activism like Fridays for Future, the Letzte Generation, Extinction Rebellion, I have great respect for them. I think they are important, but they are not part of the solution. In any population, you have a normal distribution of people. They form kind of one extreme. On the other extreme, you have the climate denialists. They kind of cancel out each other.
Yeah, just cut them out of the discussion.
What matters is in between, the over 80% of population that are actually ready to go. They're kind of mainstream. They're preoccupied with their everyday life, their families, their kids, education, health. Those are the ones we really need to get on board. I think the activists in the far, let's say, activist end play a really important point to put the flag in the sand of the real deep concerns. But I want to close by saying that I'm absolutely convinced that it's not the science that scares people. It's the inability of the political leadership to act on that science that really scares the young people. And therefore, that is what requires us to be kind of really quite forceful in this position to kind of really recognize their concerns.
Nico, same question for you. Do you sympathize a little bit with the more extreme forms of protest?
No, absolutely not, because it's an illegal form. Nevertheless, I was against it, but we will actually have the speaker of the Letzte Generation on this stage tomorrow in a panel together with a Staatsanwältin, so with a legal lawyer, and also Jürgen Trittin, who was kind of from the Greens, the guy who really launched these kind of protests back like 40, 50 years ago. So I think it's going to be a very heated debate tomorrow, which is worth watching, even though personally I was against that. But of course, we want to be an open platform and give everybody the opportunity to have a voice.
So find some shelter tomorrow when they are on stage. Same question for you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think activism has played a critical role in every social movement, and it's playing a very important role in the climate movement. I think especially youth climate activism. Last time I was here in Berlin for GreenTech, I got to join a Fridays for Future protest. I think the youth climate movement has played such a critical role. And so, I think there's a spectrum of activism. I've been very supportive of the youth climate movement. I'm a little less familiar with what's been happening in Germany, so I'm looking forward to the conversation, learning more.
Okay, yeah, we are all looking forward to it. So now as our discussion is drawing to a close, I want to ask you, all of you, 3 short questions. The first 2 you're only allowed to answer. You have to interfere. We skip that.
Don't be mad at me, but we do have to officially wrap it up. There's a great discussion. Hopefully we can continue outside of the stage as well. Please thank them with a big round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.